I'm Meredith, this is Harrison, and we are P1 Picks, a Formula One podcast that uses data and analytics to give you the betting edge on Formula One races. We are just coming off a very exciting, very emotional Silverstone where we saw Lewis Hamilton win the race. How are you feeling about that, Harrison?
What a big win for Lewis. I mean, not only a big win for Lewis, what a letdown for McLaren, right? Failing to double stack Oster Piastri. Lost me my minus 110 Piastri podium bet. And I'm very sad about that because Piastri had the pace arguably to win the race. I think McLaren's strategy has been hot garbage. I want to call out Hülkenberg and Haas for being faster than one of the Ferraris over an entire race distance, beating Charles, finishing P6. I think we've seen that Haas has some serious pace. Their upgrade looks fantastic. Seems like it brought a lot of grip, more downforce. I like Haas in the points. Let's go ahead and lock them in for Hungary. I know we can't see P10, and we can't even call out who's going to finish in the points yet, but it's going to be Hülkenberg. He'll be there.
Yeah, Hülkenberg was a great pick, and I think also, too, we've kind of been bouncing back and forth between, is this Alpine's week, is it Haas's week, what do we think about Aston Martin? I know we had them for a few times around, and really I think Haas has just emerged as like the top midfield team. That Hülkenberg bet I think is one that we are going to definitely look to put down a few more times this season. With the other bets that we had, Oscar on the podium, again, I think during the race you said something to the effect of McLaren lost this race instead of Mercedes winning it, which I think is actually like super true because the fact that they got the Lando tire strategy wrong, but then also chose not to double stack Oscar. Have you seen those pictures of him? Like, it looks like he's like sad and like on a curb. I feel like that was a race and that was a call that really could have happened for us. Then we also, saw Max coming towards the end of that race, and oh my gosh, I was like holding my breath around every curve of the last lap, just like, please Lewis, hold on, because what a win. I think that it has been an emotional roller coaster over the last few years for Lewis, and at the end of the day, we of course wanted to do well on our bets, but we are Formula One fans first and foremost, and I think that was the best outcome that we could have seen, just story-wise, and I'll take that every day as opposed to Max winning. And we are about to go into Hungary now. Harrison, what do we know about Hungary?
I think Hungary, in a lot of ways, is the exact opposite of Spa. It is Monaco without the walls, right? So it's a tight track. There's going to be a lot of low-speed corners, a lot of medium-speed corners, and the straight is just really not long enough to really make a ton of overtaking moves. So it's going to be really hard for people to pass each other this race. So qualifying is going to be super, super important. Just like Monaco, it's going to be, you want to qualify in a good place. You want to be careful to keep your opposition kind of behind you on the first lap, and then just work your strategy because, cars are really going to struggle to overtake, especially if you're in a DRS train. So Perez, you're going to have to qualify well, man. I know you've struggled the last couple races, but you gotta do something this race, man. You got to show up in Hungary.
So in terms of the track itself, what's unique about the hungaroring?
So the hungaroring is really unique because it has a very short straight, and it has a long, it's a lot of hairpin turns. It's a lot of high to medium speed corners. Sector 2 is generally a lot of low speed corners, but you want to pack on as much downforce as possible because you're really not going to get penalized very much down the straight because there really isn't very many straights in Hungary. You need a car that has really good balance. ERS deployment isn't really going to be punished as much here, so I expect Alpine to kind of be thereabouts. Expect them to have a stronger weekend than they had in Great Britain. Not necessarily the points, but a stronger weekend. And so, I consider it to be the Monaco without the walls. A great track for racing, a very bad track for overtaking. I think taking a step back, there's some stuff we need to dive into to kind of see how this affects the bets. This is my absolute favorite bet of the year right now. I can't believe there's a world where you can get Oster Piastri versus Sainz at minus 115. Let me tell you the reason I love this bet. Piastri is consistently, over the last 3 races, he's been the stronger car, right? Not only has he been in a much better form than Sainz, but also the McLaren is arguably the fastest car right now where you could argue the Ferrari is arguably the fourth fastest car. It's wild to me that this bet exists because even though Sainz has a win, you have to look at that through the lens. Leclerc was really struggling to get the car in a good place. He was really struggling in qualifying and struggling to get the tires in a good place. Now that Charles is much better, Sainz is not the top Ferrari. I mean, he was only the top Ferrari in Silverstone because they ran two different specs of car, and their Imola package is obviously better than the package that they brought in Spain. That's a lot. That says a lot there, and here's why. Ferrari aren't making the upgrades that are allowing them to move forward in the field. McLaren are, right? McLaren brought an update in Miami. Bam, they won the race. Piastri arguably had the pace to win at Silverstone if they would have double stacked. So the fact that this bet exists where Sainz and Piastri are even is something where we as Formula One bettors need to say Piastri is a league ahead of the Sainz Ferrari right now, and it's going to be at least another 6 to 7 races before Ferrari figure out how to get out of the loop of what they're seeing correlated in the wind tunnel is not coming to the track. McLaren doesn't have that problem. This is not a bet based on who's the better driver. They're both amazing. This is a bet on who has the better car right now and who's going to be stronger through the rest of the European season. And I think that's Piastri.
Are you worried about McLaren in terms of strategy, or does the Ferrari lack of performance kind of counteract that point?
Yes, I think that's a great call out. I think McLaren have had some tactical snafus in the last race, but a tactical snafu might hold Piastri back from winning, where he's still on average 2 to 3 tenths faster than Sainz. So let's look at race pace in Britain to see if we can see a little bit more insight into why Piastri is such a better bet right now than Sainz. If we look at Piastri's pace, he was roughly in the 93s, right? He was roughly running a 93.9. Sainz was running a 94.5, which means Sainz was on average 0.6 of a second slower per lap. That's the same gap that we see from Sainz all the way back to Tsunoda, right? That gap is pretty large here when you think about how far. That means Piastri was over a half a second a lap faster than Sainz. That gap, half a second a lap, when you think about that over a race distance, like, 55 laps, that's 27 seconds. That means Piastri is almost a pit stop ahead of Sainz.
So the bet here is on the season, Oscar Piastri over Carlos Sainz. That's minus 115 odds. So if you bet 100, you're going to win $86. And I think you're absolutely right. We're seeing overall performance. That car just looks way better than the Ferrari car at this point in time. I think minus 115 odds here, if we can get it now. I think as the weeks progress, this gap might widen even more significantly. So that's kind of why we're suggesting going ahead and putting money on this bet now. I love this call out.
Can we talk about Mercedes, Meredith?
Yeah, let's do it.
Mercedes might have snuck in something under that we did not pick up on. Here's why we didn't pick up on this. Mercedes might have updated the front suspension settings that are in the front of the car. Now, we know this because this bulge that was on the vehicle was not on the car before Austria. And one thing that's really important to note is, since Austria, the Mercedes have taken 2 wins. So, the conspiracy theorist in me says, some update that's been in this car has really helped Mercedes move forward. Now, Mercedes didn't have to note this change to the FIA because it wasn't technically a performance or aerodynamic change. What it looks like is happening is the Bellevue spring system that they use within the suspension to stop the car from diving forward under braking. So when a Formula One car brakes, the tendency for the car to scoot forward, well, this hydraulic suspension is going to counteract that and make sure that the tires and everything in the car stays stable and even. It seems like this update to their suspension has really made the car work a lot better in all ranges. So part of the reason that I like Mercedes on the podium here, especially ahead of the Ferraris and probably ahead of Piastri, is because this change to their front suspension, something that nobody is talking about, seems to really help the car be more balanced. And more balanced means the downforce is more even and the drivers have more confidence. I think that's why Mercedes has taken such a big step forward, especially in the last 2 races. And that's one thing that on the performance chart we haven't necessarily seen. So we definitely want to call out this change to the Mercedes front suspension. Doesn't seem like a lot of people are talking about it. So right now, if we look at podium odds, George and Lewis are both even at -110. And I think this is a really hard call to make. Here's why. Hungaroring is where Lewis had his second win in Formula One. He is amazing around this circuit. George Russell, though, it seems like he's been the top Mercedes this season, and coming off a place where he's having an engine issue, he should have the new power unit. A new power unit generally means a few more horsepower. So that's one call out that I want to make that I think not a lot of other channels are going to call out. I am tempted here to say Russell finishes on the podium, but I'd like to get through qualifying to be 100% sure about making this call, but I feel a little bit more confident on George Russell just because his pace has been ahead of Lewis. And I'm a Team LH person myself, so it hurts to say that, but I do think George might be the podium favorite here, a little bit ahead of Lewis.
Do you feel like George, are they still going to give him preferential, the updates first, the upgrades first, or do you think that that's kind of evened out now that we've just seen a Lewis win?
That's a great question. I still think he'll get the upgrades first, but here's what might be Lewis's secret advantage. So, this is a breakdown of all the tires that Pirelli is bringing for the next 4 races. So one call out that I want to make here is if we actually look at Great Britain, the hard that we see at Great Britain is actually the hardest compound that they have in the range, right? That's actually going to be the C1 tire. Now, when we go to Hungary, the soft tire, right? The soft tire that Lewis was eking out all those laps on at the end of the race is going to be the hard tire, which means that's primarily going to be the race tire that these guys are going to be on in Hungary. Now, the other call out here is that the medium tire in Hungary is not something that was used in Great Britain. It's going to be the same as the medium tire was in Austria. So it's going to be a really, really soft tire. So one thing that I want to call out about that is drivers who are a little bit better with tire wear should maybe struggle a little bit less. So I do think this gives Lewis a little bit of an advantage because he did do so well last time on the soft tire in Great Britain, which is going to turn into the hard tire in Hungary. And I think some Formula One fans, we hear about soft, medium, and hard, not necessarily understanding that there's a large range to what Pirelli can actually use as soft, medium, and hard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like you could pick either or. We'll have a better idea after qualifying, obviously, which Mercedes we do want to put our money on. But I think that's a great call out. I mean, the performance, I feel like we've been hearing about these Mercedes upgrades. They're coming with an upgrade. They're coming with an upgrade. And we've been very disappointed, really going back to last year. And it finally feels like they have a car that can win races. How do you think the Red Bull kind of fits into the McLaren and Mercedes resurgence?
I mean, it just really depends on the tire temperature. I mean, we saw that they really struggled in the first stint around Great Britain, right? The temperature was really low. They struggled to get the tire in the right working range. I mean, there were times in that race where Sainz and the Ferrari were faster than Max and the Red Bull, right? That's pretty crazy to see. But after the rain came and Max put on the hard tire, wow, they found a ton of performance and he was the fastest car on track again. So it seems that the correlation between tire temperatures and what car is going to be leading is going to be one thing that's going to be really important. Look at Canada, for example, right, where George got the pole in kind of wet, dry conditions. It seems like not only does the Mercedes work really well in wet, dry conditions, the Mercedes works really well in cooler temperatures. So as we get to qualifying and if we see cooler temperatures, we're going to know that the Mercedes is going to be stronger. And so I think temperature, as we especially start to look at this in regards to, these are going to be some of the softest tires that we've seen Pirelli bring, right? This is the softest tire that Pirelli will have brought since Austria. So getting that tire to work in the right working range, especially in the temperatures that could be really hot in Hungary, are going to be really, really interesting and really, really important for the teams.
So the softer the tire, what does that mean? Like just
So the
overall.
softer the tire, the less, the more peak grip there's going to be, but the less the tire is actually going to be able to go over an entire stint. The other piece is you're going to have to work potentially less hard to get that tire into its like peak temperature working range, but it's also going to get out of that range pretty quickly. So you can overwork the tire and you start to lose that grip. So that's one thing we want to be careful of, that teams aren't like overusing those front tires, i.e. is the same thing that lets Mercedes do really well in the cool. Does that also mean that they're going to struggle a little bit in the warmer temperatures because they're overusing what's going to be the softest tire in Pirelli's range?
So I think we'd be remiss if we did not talk about Sergio Perez, the other Red Bull driver, and just how that compares to now these two teams that have two really high functioning drivers with Lando and Oscar. We have George and Lewis. And to that point, I would say consistency wise, Carlos and Charles are light years ahead of where Max and Sergio are. What do you feel? I mean, the rumors are swirling, and I think the performance just has to be there. I've seen all of these different tweets and things about how, over the last two races, Sergio's gotten less points than Hülkenberg. He has just not been a teammate that they can have really a balanced strategy with. How do we feel about Sergio going into Hungary?
Sergio. I mean, we called him the canary in the coal mine.
We did.
We did. Because I think we knew that whenever they have a strong car, Sergio does well. Whenever the car is maybe not the fastest, and it's probably the second fastest right now, he really, really struggles. And I think Sergio's issues might come from a lack of being able to really qualify well, really struggling to get that tire temperature right. And then just, he puts himself on the back foot in qualifying that, even during the race when he's kind of trying to make things up, he's struggling. I think Great Britain was a real struggle. He just didn't seem like he had the confidence for the car in the wet, and just wasn't able to switch on the hard tire like Max was. There have been rumors that the next two races would potentially, Red Bull would look to change him out mid-season. I don't think that's true, because what are they going to replace him with? I mean, had Yuki not slid off the track in Canada, maybe. Frankly, I think Yuki has struggled ever since then. I think the update hasn't been great. Danny Rick's okay, but just because he likes Max and they get on together doesn't mean he's going to be stronger than Sergio. There were talks about Liam Lawson coming in the car, but I think it's a real push to bring in a rookie and put him right into a Red Bull. Gasly, Albon, come on, we've learned this lesson, Red Bull. The real surprise here is, and I hate to say this, is I think Sainz is the best option for them. I think they pick up Sainz at the end of the year and let Perez go because, one, Sainz will consistently push Verstappen. The thing is, if they sign Sainz, Max will probably leave and go to Mercedes because those two hate each other.
Wow.
So
Wait.
that's the truth.
You did not prep me for this Sainz. I'm a big Sainz fan, and I know you're not the biggest Sainz fan. The dominoes that would fall for that to happen, but what is the alternative? I mean, the alternatives, you just listed them, and they don't seem great. I think that we're also kind of, though, at a crisis point, it feels like, with Sergio, especially if we're going to have these other 2 to 3 teams coming after. And you've got to give Max somebody that he can work off of. It's really, he's almost going at these races with one hand tied behind his back. I know I know that his teammate isn't going to do a ton, but Sergio is doing less than that. What do you think the timeline is on this decision and also the Sainz decision?
I think if Sergio doesn't have at least a P6 finish in the next 2 races, he's probably gone. He has to be P6 within the next 2 races.
What are the odds on Sergio on the podium on this one?
Plus 1,000. They hate him.
Plus 1,000?
They hate him. The books hate him. And I mean, he doesn't like this. He doesn't go well on this track. He doesn't. Yeah, I mean, Sergio doesn't really go well around Hungary. It's not his favorite track. I mean, there's a tenth of a second between the Mercedes, the Red Bull, and the McLaren. And he's just not going to be the driver to eke out that last tenth. And that's the issue right now. Sergio's in a bad place. struggling in qualifying. And if you struggle in qualifying around Hungary, come on, man, you're done. So, yeah, I think plus 1,000 is optimistic.
Wow. Wow.
Optimistic.
That is shocking. I mean, can you think about this like last year, this time? Maybe not this time, but like at the beginning of last year when it was Max and Sergio were the race winners. God, do you think this is more of a confidence thing? Do you think this is more just like he doesn't have it anymore? What do you think this is with Sergio?
Yeah, I think he's just lost his confidence. Just struggling to get that last feel for the car, and struggling to get those tires in the right place, and it's just kind of a compounding issue. I think the car is also really set up for Max, so hopefully he'll get a new. Red Bull talked about giving him new floor, so hopefully that's a tenth or two. But yeah, I still think he's P7 looking at P6, not P looking the other way. So if he's able to beat one of the Ferraris, that's a good weekend for Sergio at this point.
Got it. Let's just talk a little bit about Ferrari since we haven't talked about them so much the last few weeks. What is going on with these cars?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've seen is whenever you're running a split test, you're struggling, right? We know from Silverstone that Charles ran the Spanish version of the upgrade, and Sainz ran the Imola version of the upgrade. And Charles was faster in the slow speed corners, but as soon as he got to the medium or the higher speed stuff, the car started bouncing and porpoising again. So they're still struggling to, it seems like Mercedes, McLaren, Red Bull, they've all figured out how to add more downforce to the car without getting the car to porpoise, where Ferrari are now struggling with that again. So it's going to take Ferrari, the rest of the year to figure it out. I don't have a lot of confidence that the rest of the upgrades are going to work. I think they're going to spend more time staying level, right? Their pace is not going to increase to the rest of the field, where teams like Haas are going to make a step forward, right? Where teams like, Aston Martin is struggling, right? They're another team where it seems like packing on the downforce and these upgrades are not correlating to lap time. It doesn't seem like they have the same porpoising problem. I would guess that Aston Martin's problems are probably more downforce on the front of the car than the back of the car, and so the car's feeling unbalanced. And they're probably struggling a little bit with car balance, where Ferrari is just struggling with porpoising. They've got the balance problem kind of down. So I think the teams are struggling with different things. I think Ferrari's is probably harder to solve, and I really hope they have this figured out by the time Lewis is here next year. That's my prayer.
God, yeah. That would be wild and sad and unfortunate. I hope they have it figured out too. I think that's all we have. We've got another week before the Hungarian Grand Prix. So this is just a little bit of a teaser, and we wanted to talk a little bit about Silverstone and where to put your money early on before we get into the week of qualifying. I think we'll definitely follow up with another podcast post-qualifying. I think that'll give us a little bit more of an idea of, who we are thinking for the race. I think we are in a good season, one that's definitely been more enjoyable, and one that we really do need to lean on some data and analytics to see, like, who's good in the tires, who's good on the ring, who's working well with strategy. All of those things factor into our picks every week. So we appreciate, as always, you guys listening and following along, and make sure to like and subscribe. I think that's all I've got for you, Harrison.